Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Kinsley. I'm the CTO at Civil. We're using Ethereum and blockchain technology to help solve some of the biggest problems in the journalism industry today. So about 2 months ago, Civil launched, and I thought I would spend some time talking about some of the things that we've learned both getting to launch as well as seeing Civil in the wild. Is anyone here familiar with like a token curated registry? We got a couple here. So we're going to talk about token curated registries and a little dash of crypto economics. It's not going to be super technical though, so it'll be fun. So only 34% of Americans say that they trust the news that they're reading in the United States. So this is an existential threat to democracy worldwide. Misinformation is being weaponized, and information is being generated and distributed algorithmically, and it incentivizes extreme content because that drives higher engagement, which translates to high dollars, and that becomes a vicious circle. And communities have been polarized to the extremes, and this has resulted in just massive distrust in institutions and in the media. So we need to find new business models that are based on trust and transparency and give independent news a shot at survival. And we need business models that reward ethical behavior, business models that compensate content creators fairly, and we need business models that speak truth to power. So really, every relationship begins with trust, and that is core to everything we do at Civil. When you visit a publication, a newsroom on Civil, you know that they're being beholden to a code of conduct. We call it the Civil Constitution. And this was created by journalism professionals, free speech advocates, and a community of people that care about the future of journalism. So if that publication wants to join the registry, they have to sign the Constitution and agree that to be held accountable to the rules within it. So, who is it that holds them accountable? And that could be all of you. It's a community of token holders, of the Civil token. So I'll give you a quick walkthrough. So if you own tokens, you have rights and responsibilities to hold the newsrooms accountable. And this is your responsibility. If you find a newsroom that you believe is in violation of the Civil Constitution, you could challenge their existence on the network. And then there is a voting period, and if the challenger wins, they'll be removed from the registry. If the challenger loses, they'll stay on the registry. Every token holder has the responsibility to ensure that newsrooms are behaving ethically. And so, was anyone here last year at Ethereal? Okay, so we did a little exercise where we went through a TCR exercise, and it was all very abstract. We used like pieces of paper, and it was fun. People got candy, and it was great. But now we're live, and everything that was abstract before, we now have real data, and we're seeing real newsrooms and real challenges. So this is just a small sample of some of the newsrooms on the registry. They're very diverse in content, in geography. We have newsrooms in Chicago and Colorado, Libya. We have one of the only independent newsrooms in Cuba, in many different languages. And some of the industries, money and politics, David in the back here, culture, local news, environmental issues. So extremely diverse content are on the registry today. So quick stats, we have current 361 token holders, 31 publications on the registry, 4 in the application phase. That's actually 5, one joined today, one applied today. And we've seen 4 challenges, and 1 is currently active. So let's dig in to some of the learnings that we've had so far, because building distributed applications with a diverse community is very, very hard, and we've learned a lot. So a successful crypto economic system relies on value-aligned participants, and the initial token distribution is the most important way to ensure that the game is played correctly. So again, like if you have a governance token, this is the most important thing. So in the case of Civil, we targeted people that were passionate about journalism, who might not necessarily be familiar with crypto, and they might not have wallets, and so onboarding presented some challenges, which we'll touch on in a second, but it was critical to ensure that if the people voting on your platform need to be aligned with the incentives and the outcomes of your network. And so a blockchain project is more than just code, it's the community that forms around it. So exchanges, so speculators decouple the price from the utility and the work done by actual token holders. So if you have like a token model that like anyone could buy it, not necessarily people that are aligned with your mission, it decouples, like if people are curating the registry and doing all this work, that increases the value, and then you have speculators coming in that are just trading it on exchanges, it messes with the crypto economic incentive. So we did a couple things in our platform to help hedge against that. So the first thing we did was change how we did our token sale. So some of you may have heard of Civil before. We had a fixed duration token sale with a hard cap and a soft cap, and it failed pretty spectacularly. Joe Lubin called it the most successful failed token launch in history. It was a learning experience, exactly. So we took those lessons and we took another shot, and we launched a continuous model. So this model is a little bit different, where we set the token price at 20 cents, and now it is going to go on until we sell all 34 million tokens. There is a secondary market in the meantime, so it could trade below that price if it needs it. But the key learning is that it gives users plenty of time to figure out everything and get their wallet set up, and controls token supply properly. And even though our tokens are selling more slowly, we know that they're going into the right hands of the people that are going to participate in the community and the network. And we know that this has so far been successful because so far the community has just been rabid and very, very active. So since we've launched, we've seen 5 challenges. One was just in the first couple of days. And so I think our biggest takeaway after launching is that like communication among your community is just so important. This happens, synchronously, asynchronously through Slack and commenting tools. And if you have a governance token, you need a governance mechanism. You need to have your community discussing and weighing in on it. So I thought I'd take a couple minutes just to look at some of the challenges that have happened so far on the network and just touch into some of the things that we've learned. So the first challenge was with 2008. This was, again, within the first couple of days. It was not very contentious. Essentially, it was unanimous, the vote. But we start to see the community like learning how to communicate with each other and use it. It started with a lot of we have a commenting within the registry tool. They're starting to learn how to communicate. So they're starting to work on their process. This challenge of the British Guild of Travel Writers was super interesting because now we're starting to get into the heart of like what it means to be on Civil and to be a publication on Civil. So the British Guild of Travel Writers is an industry group. They represent writers and photographers and broadcasters that produce like content about travel. And so the core of the challenge was, this is a industry group. This is not a publication, but they are producing like original content, and it is trustworthy, so like, should they be on the registry or should they not be? So this challenge is actually still active. I think there's about 4 hours left. I made this yesterday. So I encourage you to go check this out and form an opinion, like what should be on the Civil registry. And that's what's so cool about this network is that everyone has the ability to define what Civil is and what Civil means to you. Quick detour. So we have a somewhat unique token curated registry insofar as most TCRs have just a community vote, and that's sort of the end of it. We have put a layer above that that sort of acts as like an appellate body to allow, if a publication feels like their community vote was not like ethical or not grounded, maybe, so they could appeal to this appellate, the civil council, which has just some like really, really big names in the industry, and they take this super seriously. So we had our first appeal to the council, and they made their first ruling yesterday, and that was for this newsroom, Blockchain Trailblazers. And so the challenge itself was not very like controversial. Like they were, the claim was that they were like distributing unverified third-party content on their site. And so again, the challenge was somewhat unanimous. But what happened during the challenge was interesting. It was a 2-week period, and the publication was working a lot with the community, and they said, we want to get within compliance, we want to follow the rules, we want to fix these issues that you're presenting, and they started to, but ultimately they didn't fix everything, they fixed some things. And so then they appealed to the council, and then they made their ruling. And so ultimately they decided on 3 questions. So should they vote, should they be on the registry? Did they come into compliance during the voting period? And then does that even matter if they came into compliance? And so the way that they ended up ruling was, the challenge was right, the community voted correctly. No, they didn't come into compliance. And then they didn't want to make a decision on the third question of like, does coming into compliance within that challenge period like matter? But ultimately, because that can mess with the crypto economic incentives, like if you can challenge and then essentially like people will be less apt to challenge if they come into compliance and then they lose their money. It's really not fair. So so I think that the key thing that we've learned is that like the system is working. The community is working together to solve these problems. They're discussing, they're being civil in the way that they're discussing, and they want to work with publications because they want more quality journalism, right? And this is amazing to see it in the wild. So that's where we are today. Like I said, we have 4 hours left to vote on the British Guild of Travel Writers. I encourage you all to participate. And then real quick, now that we're live, we're focusing on our next problem. We've built this sort of trust layer. And then how do we help these publications find new business models that we spoke at earlier? So real quick, so this is a depressing statistic. 70% of the people in this survey think that their local news outlet is doing well financially, but 14% have actually paid for the news. So there's this disconnect between how people think the publications are doing and how they're actually doing. And we think that this isn't necessarily the user's fault. It's just hard to understand how to value content. So, I'm going to skip that for time. So what we're building next is this feature we're calling Civil Boosts. This is, think of it like a mini Kickstarter or Patreon that's available to any newsroom on the registry. And so we want to help provide readers with like an understanding of the cost, that it costs real money to produce this quality content, and help them fund initiatives. Like, for example, like a freedom of information request costs real money. And then if we can help show that, hey, we want to do this freedom of information request on these people, let's throw some money at it, and then let's make this happen and help engage users and become a part of the process. And finally, this is just our first initiative, and we have many more that we're working on. Come find me or any other civilians here, and we'd love to talk about this. So yeah, once again, my name is Dan Kinsley. So happy to be here, and any time for questions? Sorry, guys. Thank you so much.